that everybody's kind of coming from a similar perspective. I don't know all of your schools, and I don't know where everybody's at in terms of implementation. Hi, Dave Stanley from West Allis, West Milwaukee. Thank you for joining us. So, like I said, I would love to open it up for a dialogue, but I know sometimes with audio that gets tricky. So if you do have a question, you can type it into the chat box, or at least for right now while I'm talking. And then, Steph, what's the best way for them to kind of say that they want to talk?
If everyone could mute themselves, then when they want to talk, they can just unmute. That would work out very well.
Beautiful. So on your end, mute yourself. You can see that little green microphone on your screen, on your control panel, and that will mute you if you are on your computer, or if you, I call in by my phone, so I always mute myself just on my phone, and then people can't hear me and I have control over that. So we'll try and do that for now, and if you have questions, please do not worry about just interrupting me and saying, Emily, I've got a question.
Okay, we're getting... Okay. Go ahead, Emily. Are you there?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I am, yes. Always fun trying to troubleshoot the audio. Okay, so let's get started here. High school tier 2. I guess, I mean, I would love to know, first and foremost, what's on everybody's mind today. Like, hearing from you, what are you coming today with in terms of questions or even strengths in your implementation that you think you're doing really well. But primarily, we're here to troubleshoot some of the tier 2 implementation at high school. So if we could, if people wouldn't mind either just chatting in the box or just sharing out, why did you come today, or what's the biggest barrier, or what's the question you've got regarding tier 2 training, that would help, because I think I'd love to come back to this and be able to talk with people about what's going on. So we'll start with Brian. Brian, tell us what's going on. Brian might be doing something. Okay, Dave Stanley, how are you? Dave, are you there?
I'm here, sorry. Unmuting myself. What do we got going on? At the alternative high school,
yeah.
as I've kind of stated before when talking with various people, a lot of that, the tier 2 there is almost
Nope, did we lose Dave? We might have lost Dave here.
Hello, I accidentally muted myself. At my the two comprehensive high schools that I work with, one of the schools, the check-in, check-out, obviously the buy-in piece is limited. So one of the schools actually put the check-in, check-out progress running report on their iPads, so they don't have to carry the piece of paper, and the teachers have access to it, and they just, every kid has their own little, I don't know if you want to call it the QR code or whatever, but the monitoring is done through the iPads, so the kids don't have to worry about remembering the piece of paper or whatnot, and the data is right there, and it goes right to the team. And when they check out, the checkout person can pull that right up at the end of the day to do that. The SAG groups, they're implementing some mindfulness groups that's having some good impact as far as students using those techniques when they're starting to get angry. That's one of the issues that they're having as well, is students would get worked up and then act out, and they're using the mindfulness instead of, you know, walking out of class or storming out of class, and etc. What else is going on? The other high school, mindfulness is one of the things we're doing through our school transformation grant. So that's one of those things that's in all of our schools, not just high schools, but our elementaries and middle as well. Let's see here. Yeah, I think.
That's good. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
That's perfect. So can I just ask a clarifying question? With your check-in, check-out, you mentioned that buy-in was limited. With the students, the staff, both?
With the students, the students didn't want to be seen carrying the progress report.
Okay.
That's why they went the route of using the iPads and the QR codes. I believe it's a QR code or whatever, but they're tracking via the iPads.
Okay.
At my alternative high school, they do more. Some of the students there are more. They'll buy into it a little bit more, but it's also kind of hit and miss with that. And that staff is small enough that they meet weekly on some of the high flyers, and they problem solve around what's going on. Do they have a good week? What's working? What's not working? Etc.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful, because I wasn't sure if it was. I know sometimes with check-in, check-out at the high school level, it can be hard to grab the staff buy-in to even try it. So
that's true as well. But from my conversations, it was on the student end that they were trying to address through the iPad.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to go down the list now. Debbie. Debbie, what's going on at your high school? What are you hoping to get out of today, or what questions do you have?
Well, we have an intervention enrichment period every day, 30 minutes. And I don't feel that it's being utilized to its full potential. I think it does a lot of good for a lot of kids, but we could be using it better. So I would just like to, I guess, hear what other schools are doing and get some ideas on how we can best meet the needs of those kids that need that Tier 2 intervention.
Okay. And are those, is that 30-minute enrichment period, is that kind of for academics and social, emotional, behavioral type things too? Is it kind of anything, like, do you have permission or, approval to be able to use that for behavioral needs?
I don't know that we have really used it for behavioral needs. I don't know that that's been really a necessity. We give teachers freedom to offer what they wish. We expect that they're going to do at least 2 interventions, and that they would be requesting students to come in. Sorry, can you hear our announcement?
Yes, that's okay.
But it could be used that way. It really has a wide range of opportunities.
Okay.
We use a program called FlexiSchedule. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. And it works pretty well.
The FlexiSchedule?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Hey, Deidre, would you mind sharing out?
Sure. So I'm the external coach for 5 schools, and 1 is a high school, and we're not really to Tier 2 at the high school yet, but I wanted to join today so I could kind of see what other high schools are struggling with, or some solutions that they've come up with, so that when we're to that point where we are implementing Tier 2, I've got some ideas.
Awesome. Thank you, Deidre. And Debbie, would you mind just speaking to the FlexiSchedule just for a second so that we can clarify that for people?
Sure. It's a software package. Is it CISA? Is it CISA 7? No, it's not CISA 7. CISA 6 maybe has developed. And so all the students are put in there, and then we go on a 4-day schedule. So on Mondays, students report to homeroom during that intervention time, and then they sign up for what they're going to have for the rest of the week. So teachers put in the FlexiSketch program what they're going to be offering, and then students can either sign up or they can be requested by teachers to attend that session. So then we get a schedule. Every kid has a schedule then for the rest of the week. It's a 4-day schedule.
Yeah. So it's a way to kind of organize your enrichment interventions, because it's almost like you said, kind of like a data system that sorts everybody out, and you can kind of keep track of what people are doing, correct?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just recently heard about this from another high school in our area that was using it. So, and I'm in the southeast region, kind of down by Milwaukee. So thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Who else? Yeah, absolutely. Julie, would you mind sharing out?
Sure, no problem. And we use FlexiSketch also. We just started this year, and we've had pretty good success with it as well.
Okay.
Kind of where we're at with our high school, we've been doing PBS for a while, and we had a really strong universal level, and then we had developed actually a pretty strong team. But what has happened recently, we've had huge staff turnover in the last few years, so there are very few of us that truly understand PBIS that have gone through that initial training, so our universal has really fallen apart. So our Tier 2 has been struggling because I feel that we're almost better at Tier 2 now than we are at Tier 1, which doesn't work. So that's where we're at as a school. But commenting, probably our biggest issue with Tier 2 is agreeing to the first person who spoke. Our check-in, check-out buy-in, specifically students, we are having the same concerns. The kids don't want to do the sheets. They will check in with staff more than they will have the sheets, but then we don't have any progress monitoring, if that makes sense, other than like what we're getting from the teacher's conversation with the student. And also the other thing that we're struggling with is that kind of a quick turnaround with our SAG groups. We have about 2,000 students, and for instance, right now we're doing a group kind of on coping skills, but we've offered 2 of them so far this school year. So when you're looking at like the recommended 72 hours or of turnaround when a kid is like referred and gets some kind of intervention, that's not happening.
Okay. Well, that's helpful to know. And I think the point that you bring up regarding the staff turnover and impacting your universal and Tier 2, that was another thing that I've heard as a theme kind of this week, that some schools were really feeling like their Tier 2 might even be stronger than their Tier 1 in terms of systematic practices and implementation. So let's talk about that. Let's come back to that. And then the other piece about, it's an interesting observation that you reported out that the students will check in with the staff. Like that doesn't seem to be the issue, but the sheets really are that kind of, it's that, I don't know, I hate to use the term scarlet letter, but I think it makes it that much more nerve-wracking for the kids. So
right, and so
we can come back to that too.
Right, and so what we tried to do, because we talked about doing something electronic, but then it's almost more on the teachers, and our teachers said we just really, even though it's like a minute at the end of the class period, we're also answering lots of, that just didn't work for the teachers. So what we were doing was we just took the sheets out of it, and we were just doing that they had to check in with their teacher every morning, their assigned person, and then the teacher was kind of making like a subjective sort of thought about how things were going, and we use Alpine as our data system, and so we were tracking it that way. But it's really hard when you're supposed to kind of come together with your PBIS team and share data about what's effective and not effective, and we really don't have data per se when we don't have the sheets.
Right. That is a lot harder. I think, yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you've tried a couple of different ways. You know, that's helpful because what may work at your school may not have worked at Dave's high school, or I mean, it really does come down to what data system you have, what staff are willing to do in the building. So I'm excited to hear that you've at least tried some different ways of getting some of that staff feedback, even if it's not as systematic as you would like it to be, or it's not the greatest data for progress monitoring, but so kudos to you for that, for keeping at it.
Yeah,
so we'll come back to that piece too, that progress. How do we really progress monitor these? If, you know, like at the elementary level, we've got these daily progress reports, piece of paper, just not as easy at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
Maggie from Madison. How you doing, Maggie? I wonder if Maggie's got audio. Maggie, if you can hear me, chat in the box so that we can at least hear from you in case you don't have a mic. Sometimes people join and they don't have a mic and they can chat in the box too. Hi, Maggie. Thank you. Good. At least I know you're there. That's good. Maggie, what's going on? Would you mind just chatting in the box kind of what you're curious about regarding high school implementation right now, specifically Tier 2, perhaps? And then while we're waiting for Maggie to do that, we'll check in with Stephen. Stephen, how are you? Stephen, if you're around too, would you mind just unmuting yourself, or if you don't have a mic, chat in the box, kind of what's going on at your high school and what you're curious about today. Okay. Well, thanks, Maggie, for chatting in the box. New to high school, getting some Tier 2 pilots going on, trying Check and Connect because Check and Check Out was not working for students. The strength is restorative practices in circles. Cool. All right. I think that's really important to highlight because at the high school level, those can be really powerful. Well, at all levels, but and then yeah, thank you, Lori. Brian from Tremper, he seemed I think he had something going on when we first went down the list. So Brian, are you around? Want to share out what's going on at Tremper?
Can you hear me okay or no?
I can, thank you.
Oh, good. So Tremper High School, what we've done is we've kind of went after our dues students, basically the dropout early warning sign students, and we kind of registered about 325 students in our school, and so we kind of asked our staff to go through the list and build relationships with those students that they already have in their classrooms. You don't have to go above and beyond to call new kids in that you don't have, but build the relationships within your students and then use our document pieces to build those relationships. And so we kind of did that last year, and then we've kind of continued that this year. And then this year what we've done is really gone after our really high flyers. So we've built and we've done behavior contracts with probably 20 high-flying students that have really had behavior problems, academic problems, and attendance problems. And so we've kind of created schedules where the dean is working with those students and getting the counselor more involved to support them, and just really throwing the support pieces at them, building relationships, and getting them into our school and getting them successful. So we're just kind of trying to chip at that big number of 325, 350 students. So that seems to have been working really well, just building those relationships and using the dues as kind of our guide of what students, you know, potentially out there.
That's great. Thank you, Brian. Do you, Brian, I know we had Ed and Jane from Kenosha join us at networking this week, which was awesome. It's always good to see them. And Ed shared out, and I believe it was Tremper that was doing high school, like not high school, home visits on development days. Can you share out what that looks like?
Yeah, what we started this because it's kind of in my background. Lori Cameron knows me, and it kind of starts from my background in being a social worker type. So what I brought to Tremper High School was we did something that was called Success Highways. We know that our 9th graders are probably our most active, not only behaviorally, but we don't want to lose them in the mix. And we saw, the state data, you worry about incoming 9th graders. So what we decided to start doing was, off this Success Highways, was they would take a survey at the 8th grade, and in that survey, they would gather information of their strengths and weaknesses, whether it be academic, social, and so on. And so we used that survey to start building which kids were high risk to dropping out. And so we started doing home visits in the summer. It was me and my parent liaison. We'll go out to probably 60 houses in the summer. So we then started, well, why can't we use that for our sophomores, juniors, and seniors? So when the teachers came back and the deans came back, teachers would have a work day. The deans and maybe some police officers in the building, principals, counselors, and social workers would all form teams, and we'd go visit our sophomores, juniors, and seniors as well on teacher work days. And we have a couple teacher work days throughout the year, so every time we have a teacher work day, the teachers kind of do their thing, get their classroom set, get their grades in. The deans and the principals and the counselors all go out to houses and let the parents know how things are going, what they can get information that's coming up for Tremper High School, whether it be the parent principal letter that gets sent home every month, or the anything that's on the website, and just keep on educating them, because we feel that that's the miscommunication that some of the students just don't bring home. And so we would just want to build those relationships, build that bridge between the community and the school, that we thought was really important to do.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate you taking the time to share that out, because I think to me, and I remember when Tremper was trained in Tier 2 training, and you kind of highlighting this for the room, and that, it's kind of bringing in that other component of Tier 2 and Tier 3. I mean, all tiers really, but a critical component of Tier 2 being that home engagement, and really having a conversation and a dialogue with the families about, so that there's kind of the no assumption rule, right? That typically we send home information, we send home brochures, we send home letters, but for some families that's not going to cut it for a lot of different reasons. That's not going to cut it. And so, right, and having a conversation and making sure that, okay, does everybody know what the expectations are? How can we support you? How can you support us? I just think it's very cool.
Yeah, it's been good for us. I mean, we've seen it in ways where it's reduced our incidents in the school, ODRs, officer-driven referrals. We've seen our physical fights have gone down because we believe we know the family. They call us if their son, their daughter is having a problem, whether it be bullying or anything like that. So we know the connection's there, and hopefully they trust us a little more. That will be, we know where they live, so to speak, and we can, we're not just here as a school, you come to us mentality that's always kind of been around for so many years, instead of just now working, with these kids in the streets as well, to help them out, and support them in all areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, I think that, thank you everyone for sharing out. I think that this is kind of an interesting mix of some great strengths that are going on in the schools, and some challenges, which I think, are some pretty common challenges, that check in, check out, how to progress monitor, how to effectively provide that feedback regularly, systematically, and having that quick turnaround. I'm glad that I think it was Julie maybe that shared that out. That is really critical with Tier 2. If we're waiting, a couple of months plus, how are we effectively serving that need that's coming up? So I mean, this is great. I guess before I move on, I wondered if anybody has questions for each other based on what you've heard so far. Either just feel free to share out verbally if you've got a mic, or chat in the box, because this, I think, right here is very rich for discussion. So I don't want to move on to my agenda before checking in to see if anybody's got a burning question regarding what's been shared already.
This is Julie. I have a question if no one else does.
Yeah, go for it, Julie.
I'm just curious, at the other schools, who is running the SAG groups? And are those groups like a 1 to 2 session, or are they more traditional groups that are like 6 to 8 weeks?
Sorry, the student services has typically been doing the mindfulness groups that I mentioned, and I believe she runs them 4 to 6 weeks depending on the group. So it's typically our student services.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have social academic instructional groups going on in their school?
I would say Tremper High School is the same thing. Student services the counselors facilitate those conversations and groups as well.
Great.
And
yeah, and I think, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
I'll say, at my alternative high school, we have a teacher that does I think she calls it the girls group for some of the students there. So in that case, it's a teacher, and I believe she runs that for a quarter.
Okay.
So,
I think at the high school, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to me what I see happening in terms of implementation is that sometimes in the high school we are a little bit more locked down by the calendar year, so to speak, because you do have the quarters or trimesters or that big semester mark. And so interventions are kind of going anywhere from, I mean, as we just see, like the range of 4 to 6 weeks to 1 quarter. Sometimes academic seminar is running for a semester, especially if people are getting credit for it, and that's how it's running. So I think that basic to complex social academic instruction is lying on a pretty broad continuum. There's the shorter needs, smaller needs that might be met with just a few sessions, few meetups, and then there's like the more complex skill building that kids might need that might go on a little bit longer. Is that what, are people kind of seeing that, or is it pretty locked into we only have this one type of group, or?
This is Julie from Fond du Lac. I do think at the high school we tend to be, just because of time and the students' schedules, we kind of have to choose 1 or 2 groups that we focus on each school year, and we kind of go with a topic, which doesn't necessarily always speak to what the student's specific behavior referral was. And I also think at the high school level, the kids, we deal with a lot of just motivation and disengagement, and so that's so complex that it's not like sometimes with elementary, I think there's a specific behavior that you're tackling, versus here it's school avoidance, class avoidance, a lot of anger. I know, it's very complex, it feels.
Right. Yeah, like a lot of those needs that you're trying to kind of reduce the risk, like if we think about Tier 2 as reducing future risk or reducing further harm, even that becomes pretty complex. Like you said, like the motivation and engagement issues. It's not just like using the hallway appropriately. It's kind of a big deal.
Emily,
yeah, exactly.
excuse me, Brian added that he worries that staff changeover, as mentioned, is a concern for the consistency as well.
Yeah, so so staff turnover, I guess, what have people done to kind of help mitigate that for the staff, for the adults? Has anybody tried to plug those holes, or you know, done some, offered some in-house training, or gone to some opportunities to help build that team's skills?
I can speak for Tremper. We do the in-house, and then we get them training. I know we'll send them to anything PBIS Tier 1 inside the district, or if it's got to be through CISA, we do that as well. I know it's kind of stabilized a little bit in the last couple of years because of all that's happened, where, you know, we'd have a whole team get, because of their, you know, if they're young, we'd lose younger teachers because of the cuts and things like that. But it's kind of stabilized the last 2 years. But you can also see some staff, because their classroom loads and all the things that they're doing within our school, they do get run down or tired. So you can see some of them kind of dropping to the side and asking to kind of just slow down on the group, because to me, PBIS is really very important for the school and a big hitter. You know what I mean? It's something that we use every day. We're going through what we call a March Madness right now, kind of aligning with the college basketball. We do it with our hallways and teachers, and we ask the businesses in the district to bring us stuff to support the teachers, so gift certificates, restaurant certificates, anything that they can give us that we can give to our staff to stay positive. But trying to just keep them engaged in what we're trying to do with videos and all that stuff, it can sometimes be a lot, besides they got to teach and do all the things they do. So but we try to keep it as best as possible. Keep, you know, we do try to keep our Tier 1 team bigger than our Tier 2 team. So I don't know if that works or not, but our Tier 2 team is 6 staff, whereas Tier 1 is like 13 to 15 staff.
Okay.
Julie, would you mind unmuting and sharing your comment verbally?
Sure. I just mentioned that staff turnover is huge, but I think a bigger problem has been our admin turnover. Initially, we were all trained pretty intensively in PBIS, but now only, and our administration team is 5, but now only one of our administrators has had that training and understanding. And so I think for our PBIS team of staff, we have less support. And not because they're not supportive of PBIS, but I don't think they understand that PBIS is a daily thing, like the last caller just talked about. It's now like this event that happens, and that's not PBIS.
Yeah, so Julie, so it's like kind of coming to an agreement with the admin, with the staff, that PBIS, Tier 1, Tier 2, whatever, this is just the way we do business versus like an event or a, you know, an incentive system, collecting data. It's kind of how we do things.
Right. Even we had changed our behavior classroom management, and so every teacher has the matrix in their classroom specific for their classroom or their department. And I don't even think that as a whole our building understands that that is a piece of PBIS, and all of that ties together with what we're doing at Tier 2. Now I feel like it's all these separate things, and we're missing that, like how this all plays together, and if we're lacking in one area, it's going to affect things down the chain.
Yeah. So does anybody have any thoughts I mean, I'm sure this is not uncommon to have admin turnover, and like Julie said, it's not that they're actively opposed to PBIS, you know, because that could happen too. We get some administrators that just don't like it for whatever reason, aren't bought in. Well, that's not the issue. It's just they don't quite understand that philosophy behind it, that full picture. So has anybody done anything with their principals or administration kind of past the initial training phase now that we're several years in for many of you? Lori chatted to look at booster sessions. Yeah, that is one thing we are doing. We're noticing this is a common theme statewide in every region of our state, that between staff turnover and admin turnover, so many of the original teams for both Tier 1 and Tier 2 are not the same, right? Just like Julie said, you know, like they're not opposed to it, but nobody at this point has that kind of historical knowledge or that understanding of where does this all come from, that this is a systems approach to behavior. So we are, and this is taking just a slight detour, because since Lori chatted this out, I think this is an opportunity to just share what we're trying to do is this summer at the PBIS Summer Leadership Conference, the information for that is on our webpage, wisconsinpbisnetwork.org. We have the two-day conference, which is a Tuesday and Wednesday in August, but that Monday is going to be a pre-conference, and we're going to have a Tier 1 booster pre-conference and a Tier 2 booster so that people can send their administrators and potentially some people from their teams to get that broader understanding of PBIS. I also know that within our region, we're planning boosters for the calendar for next year, same thing, and I know other regions are looking at that as well. So that could be something. It's much more formal. I'm wondering if other people have done some things in-house that have maybe built people's skill in this area, staff members or admin.
This is Dave.
Stephanie just, yeah, great, Dave.
Oh.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do Tier 1 and Tier 2 overviews for both new team members and new coaches when they come on board, because we have coach turnover as well. I've had some administrators attend at least one of those, but for most part it's for team members and coaches. They get that, and then I also hold district level coaches corners, and we always, at that time, we always take a look at something that I may notice needs attention from my time in the buildings.
Cool. So kind of addressing it more globally and doing that. Dave is like a external coach coordinator for his whole district, so he's able to kind of see the global needs of where everybody's kind of struggling in common. Stephanie chatted out the link to our conference information if anybody is interested in looking at those boosters as a pre-conference session. And Lori just said it's a great opportunity for teams to put a day aside for established team members to connect with new team members and how everything's fitting in. I think that's true.
Dana also
now
said,
Dana had,
go ahead.
Yep, Dana had a question. What about a mentor-type relationship with a teacher leader in the building that has been a strong leader with PBIS? Dana, do you have a mic? Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, just again, kind of going back to the overall culture in a school and taking the look at that as well, and understanding if the culture in your school is really that established at recognizing that teacher leaders are true leaders in our building as well, and it's not only on the shoulders of administrators, and just seeing this as kind of that great opportunity to truly access some of the expertise that already exists in the building, and for others to kind of see a relationship such as that occurring, I think could be very impactful when you look at your overall school culture as well. And so again, it's somebody who's been a part of the system, PBIS, that's really having that opportunity to work with a new administrator to kind of bring them on board of not just PBIS in general, but this is what PBIS looks like in our building as well. And so it's kind of from the ground level at really having that understanding of their system.
I am going to share from a few schools that aren't here. This is Lori. I know in Oak Creek, their high school, you are only a Tier 2 or Tier 1 leader for 2 years, and you always have an understudy who takes on that role after 2 years, but then they're very familiar with them. And I know at St. Francis, every single faculty member is a part of some PBIS subcommittee. And I think that also helps with the administration if the whole faculty has that level of involvement. I'm just sharing that out.
Thanks, Lori. I think that's an interesting example, or a good example to kind of say, like, for both the internal coaches, it's a time-limited commitment. You know, it's not a life sentence to be kind of it helps to kind of make sure that PBIS is not dependent upon one person, and then you're also preparing for the future with having that understudy. I think the other piece that was on people's minds, and Brian had to go, which is unfortunate, but this other piece around progress monitoring, and I think, I guess I'll throw that out there pretty generally. So not just necessarily for check-in, check-out, or some type of check-in connect or engagement mentoring type intervention, which I'm guessing that is kind of, usually that's what it ends up looking like in a school. So we kind of talked about the staff turnover and some strategies for that. What about strategies for progress monitoring these interventions? Dave mentioned, I think it was Dave, having things on iPads or easily accessed through QR codes. We talked about, you know, not a perfect system, but asking teachers for thoughts, feedback, you know, reflection on how the day went. Other thoughts on progress monitoring, what people are trying or using, finding success with? Everybody's struggling? Nobody's got an idea about progress monitoring, huh?
Emily, I heard someone say, I think it was a person from Temper, a reduction in office discipline referrals or fights.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was going to be one of my questions, because I think sometimes at the high school we have so much data that it's easy to become overwhelmed and totally bogged down. I mean, I know I've been at that table with, you know, the high school pupil services staff, the admin, you know, some teachers that are the quote-unquote tier 2 team, and it's almost like I don't even know where to begin to identify students and how to exit them, because there's just so much. And I just remember one of the meetings, the social worker sitting across the table from me literally just picked up the papers and just chucked them in the air, because she was like, I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go. So what other data do high schools use that we could use that's existing data? I mean, at this point, like, let's set the whole additional progress monitoring piece to the side, or progress monitoring tool to the side. What data do you have that you could pull from on a fairly time-limited basis? I mean, anything longer than quarterly semester might be kind of hard with tier 2, but what could you pull?
I think, this is Julie from Fond du Lac. One of the things that I struggle with just fundamentally when you look at like PBIS as a system, and then I think about our jobs in the high school and trying to use data that's readily available, is the elementary schools, I think.
Hold on one second, Julie.
Yeah, okay.
I did. No, we're not going to move it.
Hey, Steph, I think, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. All right, Julie, go for it.
I think that the elementary schools do a better job of tracking those minors, and so I think sometimes you can tackle like small behaviors and see that immediate change over the course of a couple weeks, where at the high school, when we get that, like our school only does majors, at the high school. And so by the time we have a major entered in our system, it's become way more complex. And so, you know, like we've been using attendance, a daily attendance as like a data that's readily available, and also office behavior referrals, that's data that's readily available. But sometimes like those referrals, by the time that referral happens, now it's become a more complex situation, and it's not something that can be easily remedied or targeted in a couple of days. And then you have the team for that student is 9 different teachers from 9 different class periods who quite honestly can never make it to a meeting at the same time. So oftentimes we're trying to problem solve and come up with an intervention plan for a kiddo with 2 teachers, and they're kind of speaking for all of the 9. So the buy-in as whatever that intervention plan is never totally there.
Gotcha. So for more of those, like you said, like the kids that end up being identified are those higher level, almost needing like a brief behavior intervention plan, if I'm understanding it correctly, because you're kind of problem solving, coming up with a plan for each child or each student, and then, like you said, there's 2 teachers speaking on behalf of the 9 or more who might be involved with that plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, I feel like we really kind of jump between, like, there's the universal that we do for all of our kids, and we're reaching a lot of them that way, and then our next kind of catch point is almost level tier 3, almost. And so there's that gray area. So I think as far as like staff buy-in, they're not feeling a ton of success, because by the time we kind of get them connected, they're already like a pretty high flyer, as that other, I think another school indicated too, that they kind of have behavior contracts with some of their higher flyers. And so those kids, their behaviors are so complex, it's very difficult to exit them in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And I don't know if other schools are feeling that too, but I just, when I go to trainings and I'm listening for ideas, I think at the elementary level, when you're working with a team of 3 teachers that see that child all day long, and you can track those minors and then make a difference before it gets to that bigger level. And maybe, that's just my opinion.
No, I think, don't downplay that. I think that that's a really, that's probably more common than we'd think, that at the high school level, you know, the kids that end up getting flagged, it's because what our entrance criteria, quote unquote, would be, or whatever would flag them, it's flagging them at a point where it's a much bigger deal. You know, it's not just this like brief thing anymore, or this smaller intervention. So is there a way, Julie and other people share out, but because again, this is all of us trying to dig deeper and help each other out here, but is there a way, have you guys talked at all about how to back that truck up at all? You know, like if a kid's going to get one office referral, and that's a really big deal in your school, and it probably warrants pretty significant support, are there any other things that you can tap into easily, you know, or at least efficiently, to kind of catch those students? I don't know. I guess that would be my question, is kind of trying to figure out what is the gap. You know, if the gap is between the universal data and this bigger data, how can we look to catch them sooner? And then also go back to that, you know, providing support within a few days, or, you know, a pretty brief amount of time. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
This is Julie again. We did try doing, for 2 years, we tried doing one of those like gated screeners where we had every teacher in the school building think of like their 4th hour class, and then we took those names, and then we did like another gate sort of screening, and then we took that list of kids, because those are kids that maybe didn't have referrals yet. We tried that, and that wasn't bad, but then we ran into that, so we tried to kind of put all those kids first through check-in, check-out, because the school in Illinois had been doing that, and then work from there to kind of whittle down our numbers. But what was happening then, we're running into that kids aren't buying into the check-in, check-out. So that's why we discontinued, because we were doing a lot of work, but then not having an intervention that was working with the kids.
Gotcha. And so how were the students identified? Because I think that maybe it was a promising practice that needed some tweaks. So how were the students identified through that gated screening process or through your screening process?
We did, so we had every teacher think of, and there's I think it's called teacher perception data, that's a legitimate thing. We had every teacher think of, that was one class period, so we knew we were hitting every kid in the school, and they had to list their top 3 in that class period, who are their top 3 externalizers, and we gave them some examples, and their top 3 internalizers. And so they created that list for us, and most of them couldn't think of 3, they would just list like 1 or 2. And so then our PBIS team sorted through those kids and kind of weeded out the tier 3, the kids we already know are getting extensive services. And then we did it different both years. One of the years, and we did this once a semester, one of the years we had them do, I can't remember if it was the BASC, but we had them do like an actual evidence-based screening. That I can't remember, we had the students or the teachers, it's been a few years now, fill that out for the kids that were on that list, and then if they also had indicated concerns on there, then that's how they would be added to our list. So they had kind of had the double screening. And then the other year we just did the, we took that list of kids and compared it to data we had available, so their office discipline referrals and then also like counselor nurse visits. And so we looked at that, and if they also had popped up on that radar over the last like 1 or 2 months, then that's how that was like the double gate, and then that's how we got our list.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that sounds really, I mean, I'm impressed that you guys got that far and you even tried it. That's fantastic. And I think, you know, where was I going to go with that? With that screening process. I think that is, at the high school level, becomes really critical. I know Brian had to leave, but they use dues. And I know we're getting on to 9:30, so if you have to go, I totally get it. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to say really quickly, you know, catching those students at varying levels, like you talked about. You know, Brian, I think, mentioned doing those home visits, which they called Success Highways with 9th graders, and then they kind of expanded it from there at the multiple grade levels. Using the dues to identify students early on, you know, kind of, and dues is essentially just a way to flag kids early on. You know, what's their middle school data saying, and what can we do about it in 9th grade, or, you know, so that we can prevent that future dropout, which is the goal, right? So I think, I mean, it sounds like you guys had an interesting process, and it might just be the support needed to be tweaked in terms of, you know, providing a relationship versus the strict check in, check out. I don't know. I would love to have a conversation with you more, and I know some of your technical assistance coordinators are on the call too, Rachel Salatis and Liz Paczynski. But I think that at the high school, to me, seems to be a really promising way to go to identify those students earlier on, because like you said, Julie, in the middle of the year, when things get rolling, it is harder to catch them earlier on and have that team meeting and provide those systemic, you know, lower level supports. So that's really, I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of excited about this. I would love to talk with you more about it. And Lori said, what about using that process to select students for academic seminar? Beautiful. Thank you, Lori, for sharing that out. You know, Julie, I don't know if you guys are looking at academic seminar or if you've tried that, but that could be a potential process as well. You know, rather than going, you know, Rachel always uses this great example in training or, you know, kind of, what is it called? Metaphor, what's the other one? But and my husband's an English teacher. He would really be shaming me at this point. But, you know, if you've only got 100 pennies to spend with Tier 2 supports, because you can't do everything all at once, and we certainly can't, you know, it could, especially at the high school, we could really drive ourselves crazy. And so with those 100 pennies, how could you potentially spend those to catch those kids early on? Is it going to be through the screening process and then plugging them into academic seminar with maybe a component of check in, check out to increase that engagement and increase those skills? You know, is it going to be that we're going to put our pennies into these home visits because we feel like that will have a really good bang for our buck in terms of harm reduction and potentially preventing future problems or dropouts. So think about how you're going to spend your pennies, I guess, at this point, since it is 9:32 and I don't want to take too much time. Julie asks, is there academic seminar or semester class focusing on school engagement? So yeah, academic seminar, you can download the handbook. It's the Behavior Education Program Handbook, I believe is the official term, which you can download and read. It's lots of fun summer reading. It's pretty extensive, but very easy to read, and it has a lot of specifics in terms of implementation. Academic seminar has a almost like a skill-based teaching component that helps to target specific skills that will increase students' academic engagement. It really focuses on what we call academic enablers, so those behaviors that contribute to success at the high school level. Think about it like homework completion, organization, communication with teachers, you know, all of those basic level skills that become super critical at grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 in order to make sure that kids have what they need to get their work done, first and foremost. And so within academic seminar, there can be a component where there is some teaching going on in the class. The students are given time to apply those skills with their homework or coursework in that setting so that the teacher can help them apply those skills with their work. And then there is a feedback component. So some schools have used it. In the handbook, it talks about the check and check out component. You know, I know in a couple of high schools that I've worked with, like it's become email communication between teachers and the students, and feedback's provided electronically. But again, tied to those skills that the students are learning in academic seminar. So although it does help with school engagement in the long run, I think the payoff more immediately is on those skills and application of skills within the class environment. Does that help, Julie? Thanks for clarifying. I'm going to look more into this. It's totally worth looking into it. Yeah. Totally worth looking into. It is a little bit more in terms of getting it started up because it's not just like, hey, let's try this 6 to 8 week intervention. You know, but you can, the materials will definitely give you food for thought in terms of the skills at Tier 2 that we're trying to target. And sorry about my dog. She apparently thinks something very exciting is happening. So hopefully that'll give you some good food for thought. Everybody else, I know it's 9:35. I am happy to stay on for a couple more minutes, but I also know that people do need to go. So let me know if